Welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective with Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. Planning for your financial future means navigating challenges like market volatility, inflation, and retirement income. Pankinen Financial Perspective is here to help by addressing common financial concerns, sharing valuable strategies, and exploring ways you can work toward your financial goals. Now let's get started with Pankinen Financial Perspective.
Hello and welcome to the Pankinen Financial Perspective. My name is Ashton Pankinen with Pankinen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 952-873-2703 or visit us online at pankinenfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. And while at my website, click on the radio page to check out past shows and to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Also, while on my page, click the link at the top to get the latest retirement guide. There's a question I get asked more than any other, and it usually sounds something like this. Am I behind? Sometimes people ask about a specific goal. Sometimes it's more of a general feeling or a nagging sense that maybe retirement isn't far away as it used to feel, and maybe their savings just aren't where they should be. Today, we're going to try and answer the question honestly with real data and real strategies for what to do next. But before we do that, let me bring in my co-host, Tony Shore, who always helps keep the conversation grounded and relatable.
Yeah, well, maybe relatable. Grounded, it might be going a step too far. I think you're the grounded one here on the show. But I mean, obviously, a lot of people, that's a big worry. Am I going to have enough for retirement, enough money to last as long as I do? When can I retire? Where is this money going to come from? And how do I match up? You know, what do people out there retiring and living on in retirement? So it's one of those topics, I think, that makes people a little bit uncomfortable because it involves comparing yourself to others. But the sooner you face it and deal with it, the better it is. And I think, you know, that discomfort can actually be useful to motivate yourself. Let's get into it. So where do you want to begin today?
Yeah, let's get started here. During the show, we're going to be pulling data and insights from a recent Kiplinger article. It's headlined The Average Retirement Savings by Age. And what I want to say up front here is this isn't about making anyone feel bad. The most important thing we can do today is just give people kind of an honest picture of where the country stands and then talk about what to do about it. Because the numbers do tell a story, and I believe understanding the story is the first step toward writing a better one for yourself.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So I think we should probably start with the basics. And now, when you say retirement savings, what exactly are you counting or are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. We're talking about the accounts people set aside specifically for retirement, including 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, maybe HSAs used as investment vehicles, and then after-tax brokerage accounts earmarked for the future. Again, we're not going to count that home equity or other assets in this conversation if they aren't truly earmarked for that long-term retirement goal. Again, it's something we do want to take into consideration, but we want to look at the money that's intentionally put to work for retirement. And then there's an important distinction in how we look at those numbers versus the median.
Yeah. And you mentioned 401ks, 403bs, 457s, any employer sponsored plan, TSPs for those government workers. I know we have a few of those listening. So break this down for us. When you say median and mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, the mean is what most people think of as average. With this, you add everything up and divide it by the number of people. And then the median is actually that middle number. So it's half the people are above it and half the people are below it. And so when you're looking at retirement savings in America, the mean can be pretty misleading because relatively small number of very wealthy households can pull that average way up. And I think the median kind of gives us a much more honest picture of where the typical American actually is. And then again, the median can tell that sobering story, but also a motivating one if you are a little bit behind.
Yeah. Averages are always interesting. And you're right. The average can be deceiving, or the mean or the average. So it is good to look at the median. So let's get into the data. Walk us through what those Federal Reserve numbers show, age group by age group. We'll go by age groups here.
Yeah, let's start with the youngest workers, and that's those under age 35. Median retirement savings for that group is $18,350, where again, the mean is closer to $49,000, which again is kind of a big gap there. And it tells you that there's some high earners pulling that number up. But for most people under 35, right around 18,000.
Okay. So how should somebody feel about that number?
Another good question. I think context matters here. For a 25-year-old just finding their footing, 18,000 is a solid start, especially if it's growing in a tax advantaged account, maybe that Roth IRA. For a 34-year-old that's a higher earner, it might be time to press on that accelerator a little bit. But here's the thing, the most powerful assessment or an asset, I guess, for someone under 35 isn't money, it's that time. And we're going to come back to why that matters enormously later in the show.
Sure. Yeah, it's time. And as they say, time is money. So
for sure,
let's move up into the next age group, 35 to 44. I know this is probably where you're at.
Yeah. So that median jumps up to 45,000 for that group. The mean is about 141,000. So again, pretty widespread there. That mid to late or mid 30s to early 40s. I believe people should ideally have somewhere between 1 and 3 times their annual salary saved. So for a lot of people, 45,000 is behind that benchmark, but it's not too late, and not even close to being too late. That compounding engine is still running strong in this decade. So again, if you make $50,000, 3 times would be that $150,000 mark.
Sure. But where are people age 45 to 54 at?
Yeah, now we're in the thick of the peak earning years. Median savings should be that $115,000. Mean is $313,000. So again, I think this is often kind of that wake-up call decade for some people. The kids might be leaving the house or getting ready to leave the house. Mortgage might be a little more manageable. And then suddenly people look at their retirement accounts and realize they've got a little catching up to do. The good news is this is also the decade where income tends to be the highest. And so again, where targeted contributions into a retirement account can really make a big difference.
Oh, I would imagine it can make a huge difference. And I know this is something that you sit down with folks and talk about. In fact, speaking of that, before we continue today, before we keep going, please let our listeners out there know how they can schedule a complimentary consultation if they want to ask questions or get more information or set up that no charge, no obligation consultation with you.
Yeah, again, we've got offices in downtown Belle Plaine, downtown Gaylord. Best way to reach us is just give us a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. Visit us online at pankoninfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. Scheduling a consultation only takes a few minutes, and we're always happy to work around your schedule.
Awesome. And you know what, Ashton, what I love about you, and you love to hear from people. You love talking to people in the community. I know that you stay active in the community. You just had a big coffee meeting at your office today. Yeah,
we had the chamber coffee at our office today. It's kind of cool. We've been on KCHK, K-Check for a little over a year now. And we're definitely getting a lot more feedback on clients that have heard us on the radio or have been tuning in the podcast.
Good. Yeah, I know more and more listeners each week, and you love to hear from them. Yeah. So I encourage our listeners to give you a call because you love hearing from them. Now, let's address the home stretch. We still haven't covered my age group yet. 55 to 64. I'm somewhere in there. We'll just say that. And I think that's an important age group, isn't it? Especially when you're trying to be prepared for retirement.
Yeah, and this number I think deserves the most attention today. The median retirement savings for people in that age range, 55 to 64, and are about a decade or less from retirement is about 185,000. And again, that mean actually is up to 537,000.
Wow.
But the median, or that number that reflects what most people in that age group actually have, is about 185,000.
Wow. And for the people, I think that the people that have almost nothing saved or have hundreds of millions saved are really pulling that average. So the average would be $537 or $537,000 by this point. But that's really being affected by the extremes, the highers and the lowers, right? Affect extremes, especially the high earners. But the median the median is actually 185,000, and that's where a lot of people live. So what I always find interesting here, Ashton, is that people think they need to retire. It's almost always more than they have, always, no matter how much they have. And it's probably also different from what they'll actually need. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah. Again, it's definitely the case. People always think they're going to be short, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. According to a recent survey data noted in the article that we've been discussing today, the so-called magic number Americans think they need to retire comfortably is about 1.46 million, and that's actually up 200,000 from last year's figure. And again, I know years ago everybody talked about $1 million is what they need, and again, $1 million doesn't go as far as it used to.
Sure.
And so again, we see that number kind of creeping up, and again, so when you put those numbers side by side, that $185,000 median savings versus that 1.46 million target, you can see why this conversation we're having today really matters.
Yeah.
And why so many people feel the way they do when they look at their statements.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that 1.46 million, that's what people think they need to retire comfortably. And I've seen articles that say that. I've seen a couple articles, hey, you probably need about this to retire, but everybody's situation is different. Some people can retire comfortably on much less. Some people need more. But the gap between what Americans think they need and what most Americans have, that's significant. What about people, though? Let's cover an age group we haven't talked about, and that's people who are already 65 and older.
Yeah, we break those down into two groups here. We look at age 65 to 74. That median savings is about 200,000. And it's actually a bit higher than the 55 to 64 group, which tells you some people are still contributing and growing those accounts early in retirement. And then if you look at 75 and over, the median drops to 130,000, which makes sense because people are starting to draw down on their savings at that point. They're no longer probably contributing to that retirement account or trying to grow it. So I think it's worth noting that even in retirement, the picture isn't static. How you manage distributions, when you claim and file for that Social Security, how you handle those different healthcare costs, that can really shape the trajectory of your retirement.
Oh, I would imagine. And that's why we've done whole shows about Social Security maximization or healthcare costs and tax planning for the future and for retirement. What's the headline takeaway, though, Ashton, from all these numbers? Yeah,
I think the takeaway is this. Most Americans aren't on track to retire with the kind of savings and financial benchmarks that they suggest they actually need. And that's not a moral failure. It's just reality shaped by, stagnant wages, cost of living pressures, different life events, healthcare system that can wipe out savings quickly, increasing premiums, those types of things, and a lot of other factors just beyond our individual control. But the data is what it is. And I believe that most helpful thing we can do is look at it honestly and then talk about what's actually available to people to help solve that shortfall.
Yeah. And I think that would be helpful. And I know that's what you like to do to help people. You've done this for so many people in our community. Like you say, look at it honestly and talk about what's actually available, what can be done, and come up with a plan. Let's also talk about the why here, right? I think a lot of listeners are probably going to hear those numbers and wonder how we got here as a country. Why is there this gap between what we think we need or what we need and what we actually have?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons worth kind of understanding. First, and this does surprise a lot of people, more than half of American households report having no dedicated retirement savings at all. Zero, none.
Wow.
And so, when you look at people who are actively contributing to a 401k plan or IRA, the numbers look meaningfully better. So again, total assets in retirement accounts in the U.S. recently crossed that 49 trillion mark, which is just a staggering number on its own. But the gap between consistent savers and everyone else is part of what makes this natural picture so uneven.
Wow. Wow. So total assets that are in retirement accounts right now in the U.S. is more than 49 trillion. That's actually more than our national debt, which is outrageous.
Yes. Yeah.
And with some left over for the budget, if everybody was willing to give up everything in their retirement accounts and pay off our national debt, wait, how would that help us? I don't know. I don't think you're going to get anyone to do that. But that begs the question, though, when you say, first of all, more than half of American households report having no dedicated retirement savings at all. Why aren't more people saving?
Well, it's rarely because they don't want to. I think for most people, it comes down to that cash flow, rent, childcare, healthcare, student loans. The basics of life consume the budget, especially in your 20s and 30s. Another big piece of it, I think, is just financial intelligence and knowledge being taught to people. One of the reasons I enjoy doing this show is hopefully we're educating people on this. And, not a lot of people are told to start early and often. If you start that 401k right away in your first job, it makes a big difference. And for a long time, many employers didn't offer retirement plans or offered plans that employees didn't understand, or maybe they didn't trust. They've started to do automatic enrollment, which has helped a lot, but it's a relatively recent development.
It's kind of a forced savings for retirement that way.
For sure.
And I like your point also, save early, save often. Well, hey, There's also a behavioral piece, right? Emotions play a part in this. It's kind of the way we're wired to think about the future, right? That plays a part in this.
Absolutely. We tend to respond to what's urgent over what's important. Retirement is important, but it doesn't feel urgent until suddenly it does. And by that time it feels urgent. Some of the most powerful tools available, particularly that compound growth over multiple decades, are no longer on the table the same way. Again, we talked about this in other shows. Compound interest is kind of that eighth wonder of the world. That's why we believe starting early is so critical, not because the amounts have to be large, but because time does just an enormous amount of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, again, back to time. And you've mentioned that before. Time is our friend. Time is money. So the earlier you start, the better. But let's dig into that compounding piece, because I think it's one of those concepts where people hear it a lot, compounding interest. They maybe have heard the term, it's the eighth wonder of the world, but they don't always feel it in a visceral way or completely understand how powerful it is.
Yeah. Here's a number I think really puts it into perspective. So let's just take a look at $10,000 invested at age 30, assuming a pretty conservative 7% annual rate of return. That grows to roughly $106,000 by age 65. So again, you put in $10,000 at age 30, 7% rate of return grows to $106,000 by age 65. That same $10,000 invested at age 45 grows to about $38,000. So same money, same return rate, but 15 fewer years of compounding interest makes nearly a $70,000 difference on just that single $10,000 investment. So now if we multiply that across years of those contributions, you start to understand why time is the single most valuable asset young investors have. And I think it's a point that really can't be made often enough.
Yeah, time and compounding interest. And I think the flip side of that is that it's also never too late to do something, though, right?
Yeah, that is the other side of the conversation, and it's equally important. Compounding argument is not meant to make people who started late feel hopeless. It's meant to motivate people who haven't started yet. So again, because every dollar that goes in today starts compounding today. The old adage, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time was right now. And I think it applies perfectly to retirement savings as well.
Now let's get practical here. For listeners at different life stages, what can they actually do right now?
Yeah, let's walk through it by decade because the strategies are a bit different depending on where you are. So let's again just start in your 20s and 30s. Single most important move is to simply get started. Even small contributions matter enormously because of compounding. Two specific moves that I think are worth highlighting for that decade. First, if your employer offers a 401k match, contribute at least enough to capture that full match. That's an immediate 100% return on your money before the market does anything. And you can't beat that anywhere. I always joke with clients, I wish I could give you that rate of return, but I can't. So again, that's the first thing we want to make sure we'd accomplish. The second is what I call the raise rule. Every time you get a salary increase, commit half that raise to your retirement contributions before it ever touches your checking account. So again, your take home still goes up, and so does your future savings, and you never build a lifestyle expectations around the money you redirected. So again, you get a 4% raise, 2% goes into 401k, 2% gets as extra take home.
Yeah. And I think that's good for those who are a little younger. I think as we get older, and by we, I mean me, I think it's even smart to take if I get a raise, I just increase my contribution amount to my retirement plans by that much.
Yep.
Because it's money I've never had, so I'm not going to miss it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, and that's really powerful.
It is. Another thing here is lifestyle inflation. It's one of the quieter enemies of retirement savings. People get that raise, their spending expands to match it, and then the net change of their savings rate is actually zero. So again, if you automate a portion of every raise before it hits your account, you sidestep that problem entirely. And it's one of those strategies that sounds simple, but could add up to tens of thousands of dollars over your career.
Yeah. And what you're really talking about, there's lifestyle creep, right?
Yep.
Keeping up with the Joneses, you get more money, you spend it, then you get used to spending that money, and all of a sudden you're living a more costly lifestyle. So, okay, what about people in their 40s?
Yeah, the 40s are where I think of the front loading decade. You're likely earning more than you were in your 30s. The compounding clock is still running, and if you can push hard now, you could set yourself up for a coast a bit later. 2026 401k contribution limit was $24,500 for most people. If your cash flow allows it, I believe maxing it out should be a big priority. And if you can do it early in the year rather than spreading across 12 months, you get more time in the market, which, as we've established before, matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's huge. And there's also something called the 15-year horizon, 15-year horizon. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I like to think of it this way. You can aggressively fund your retirement account between age 45 and 50. The compounding effect over the next 15 years could potentially double that balance, even if you scale back contributions into your late 50s to cover other life expenses that happen then. So again, the goal is to get enough money working for you that you're not entirely dependent on that continued contributions to reach your target. You want the portfolio doing some of that hard work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what about when you're in your 50s? As you've said before, this age category, this is where catch-up contributions come into play, right?
Yeah, it's really a valuable tool we believe more people should be actively using. Once you turn 50, the IRS allows you to contribute extra money beyond the standard limits to your tax advantage retirement accounts. For 401ks in 2026, that's an additional $8,000 on top of the standard limit, bringing your total possible contributions up to $32,500 for the year. And then for IRAs, the catch-up contributions, you can contribute up to $8,600. And so again, if you're behind, these higher ceilings could make a meaningful difference as you cross that 10 to 15 year stretch.
Is there an even more generous provision for people in their early 60s? There is, right? This is a recent one.
Yeah, this is, again, underutilized usually. And most people don't know that it exists because it is relatively new. Thanks to recent legislation, if you're between the ages of 60 and 63, we've got a super catch-up provision, which allows for even higher contribution ceiling. And for 2026, that's $11,250 in additional catch-up contributions to your 401k, bringing the total you could put in there to $35,750. And that is a significant amount of money. And for someone in that age window, the cash flow, you typically have the cash flow to take advantage of it. And it could be a real game changer for the final stretch before retirement.
So what about people who are already near or even in retirement and their balance just isn't where they'd hoped it be? What can they do?
Yeah, a few thoughts here. First, I believe strongly in Social Security, delaying Social Security strategy. For every year you wait to claim past the full retirement age, Up to age 70, your monthly benefit typically increases by 8%. That's reliable, inflation-adjusted return that is very hard to replicate anywhere on the open market. So again, before you decide to make that Social Security decision, make sure you consult a professional, because again, once you choose that Social Security amount, you're locked in at that lower rate for life. So sometimes you can bridge that gap with part-time income, or maybe a strategic drawdown from your savings, or some combination of the two. And then delaying that Social Security could make a meaningful change to your financial picture for the rest of your life. And for a lot of people, that might add up to tens of thousands of dollars when you look at lifetime of benefits. But again, it is a case-by-case basis when looking at these types of cash flow in retirement.
Yeah, and I think that's a powerful lever that I think it gets overlooked. I think a lot of people might overlook that one.
Yeah, I just met with somebody before this podcast or radio show recording that, hey, we're going to turn it on 62. I'm like, well, did you know that it increases every year you wait by 8%? And, difference for them, I think in this scenario was about $1,100 between age 62 and 67, which was their full retirement age. And so again, it's something that I think a lot of people just assume, hey, I'm turning 62, let's turn it on. But it's definitely something you want to sit down and look at cash flow and the overall picture as well before turning it on.
Yeah, that's huge. That is huge. And I think that's a really good way to do it. So is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Yeah, another thing worth mentioning is downsizing earlier than later. Again, you want to make sure when you had kids, your home was maybe larger than you need now. You might have some equity in the home, possibility of lowering property taxes and insurance by downsizing. So that's something that could go towards those retirement contributions in retirement. And again, something we can model out for you as well.
Well, I think that's really, really good. And I think that it brings us back to everything we've talked about today: compounding interest, catch-up strategies, Social Security timing, and having a good picture of where you stand. It all connects. So remind our listeners how they can get a plan in place and you get your help putting that in place.
Yeah, if anything we've talked about today has raised questions, whether you're wondering how to compare the number we've shared, or you just like to sit down and take a closer look at where things stand, give our office a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703, or visit us online at pankinonfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. We can walk you through this in a single conversation, and we're always happy to work around your schedule.
All right. Great show today. Really appreciate that, Ashton. And that does it for the Pankin Financial Perspective with our host, Ashton Pankin.
Thank you for joining us for Pankin Financial Perspective. Don't head into retirement without a plan for both your finances and your health. For more information, contact Ashton Pankin at Pankin Financial Group at 952-873-2703 or visit pankininfinancialgroup.com. Join us again soon for another episode of Pankin Financial Perspective. Advisory services are offered by Ashton Pankin LLC DBA Pankin Financial Group, an investment advisor in the state of Minnesota.
All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.